that may invalidate some of the things that we are trying to do. So two main tests here, and then we'll reference a couple others that may be of interest. So the first test, the setup is, this is an opera company, and they're asking people to donate to youth opera on ticket purchase. So as you purchase a ticket, goes through and says, would you like to donate to help with youth opera outreach? And in the control version, they have the opportunity for you to say, I've donated already, or no, thank you. But you don't have to, in the control, choose one of those two things. You can just go on without clicking that. So they tested two things. They tested a higher ask string, doubling their asks, and then they tested requiring someone to choose one of those two things at the end of purchase. Like literally, you could not purchase your opera tickets without either donating or saying, I've donated already, or I do not want to donate. So they required that field. Question is, this is a digital, yes, this is a digital effort. This is an effort that they do when someone makes an online ticket purchase. So what happened? We're going to dispense with a couple of things up front. First is, why am I talking about an opera company when most of you are not opera companies? And especially in the current climate when you would not want an opera ticket, even more than some of you might not already want an opera ticket. And I think this has some generalizability because we do sometimes make asks after content, we make asks in survey, on light boxes, and sometimes there's the temptation to try to require a yes or no out of people to see if you can get additional donations. So that's where I think this kind of fits into the testing canon. And then I'm also going to dispense with the ask string test here. They say, after establishing a baseline, we pushed up the grid of suggested donations in the expectation that it would increase donations. This failed miserably. These are the author's words. And if you know scientific papers, you recognize that that's not a normal thing for an author to say. They usually say there was a significant downward effect, negative effect on response rate, P is less than 0.01, those sorts of things. They don't say this failed miserably, which is an indication of how badly it failed. Now, one of the tricks in this experiment is they tested control with high ask string, and control with high ask string and the required language. And so we don't have a pure test of just the I required to say I donated previously or no, I don't want to donate against the control. So a lot of our comparisons are against that high dollar, our comparisons are against this failed miserably high dollar ask. So what happened when we forced people to choose what to do with their donations? It caused more people to donate, and it actually more than offset the abject failure of the higher ask amount, meaning that they raised more with the higher ask amount and the forced choice, even though the higher ask amount caused things to go down by about half, if I'm looking at the numbers correctly. So that was a huge impact. Response rate was a percentage point higher. Average gift almost also went up. And those of you who have been on these calls or done a lot of testing in the past know that if you can get both your response rate and your average gift to go up, then you have stumbled across a really strong tactic, because most of the times those things trade off with each other. And the theory for why this is people were avoiding the ask when they were to preserve their own self-identity. They want to think of themselves as a good person, but they didn't want to donate in this way. And so they just kind of pretended like I didn't see the choice at the bottom. And when you force them to do that, you're forcing them to kind of hold up a mirror to themselves and say, look at yourself, you are not a donor if you choose not to donate in this time. And so you're really kind of getting in their face at this point. Now, avoiding the ask, and I realize that this next slide is mislabeled. It should be avoiding the ask. This is what you do. This is what happens when you do these slides while you're also doing coronavirus response. So what is avoiding the ask? It turns out when you tell people that there's going to be an ask, you get people who try to avoid that ask. So great study of Salvation Army bell ringers where they put them at either one door or two doors of a two-door supermarket. And they asked the bell ringers to either to just ring the bell, so passive ask, or to verbally ask and verbally engage people as they went through. And it turned out that verbally asking increased the number of givers, increased the amount given. It also substantially increased the number of people who went out of the supermarket on the other side of the supermarket when they were only at one entrance. So you saw that you were asked on the way in, you intentionally avoid that exit on the way out. And thinking about supermarkets, you usually park next to the exit, entrance and exit you're going to use. So people were choosing to make a walk in this case. In this case, I believe it was a 10% of people shifted to the other exit when there was just the bell ringing. 25% of people went to the other exit when you were verbally asked for a donation. Not surprisingly, donations also went up when they put bell ringers at both exits of the supermarket. There's also a case where they put flyers on doors in advance of door-to-door fundraising that said, we're going to be in your neighborhood, here's the times that we're going to be by, we'd love to talk with you. And it reduced the number of people opening the door by 10 to 25% in this case as well. So people avoid the ask in about equal numbers here. Actually, I got the Salvation Army numbers incorrect. I believe that was, now that I'm thinking about it, it was 27 to 32% went to the other door. So putting a flyer on the door, telling people you're going to be around, substantially reduced the number of people opening the door. Those who did open the door did commit at a higher rate, and so there's an advantage there. The people who weren't going to give anyway clear out of town or don't answer the door during that time period, but still a substantial decrease in number of people answering doors. So people avoid the ask. So am I saying that you should get people to confront the ask? Well, remember I said this is about unintended consequences. So going back to our opera company, when you're looking at the opera company, you're forcing people to say, I am a donor or I am not a donor. And customers who are forced to admit that they were not a donor during their online experience bought significantly fewer tickets online next season. And the overall donation rate from those customers was lower as well. So you were forcing people to confront that they weren't donors. And so they avoided that interaction in the future. They did the equivalent of going to the other Salvation Army exit once they knew the ask was going to be there. So they did avoid the ask in digital. They couldn't do that anymore, so they avoided the digital experience. That said, there wasn't an overall decrease in ticket sales. People just picked up the phone and ordered their opera ticket so that they wouldn't face that ask. Chances are you may get them to stop buying opera tickets if you did make an ask on that phone call as they were buying tickets. Now, for the things that we would be doing with this information, you're doing things like post content asks. You don't have a monopoly on opera tickets like they do in that case. Here, if you force someone to confront whether they would make that donation, you would probably be driving folks away from future experiences from them. So it's an interesting tale in that it increases negative back end to that unintended consequence. Before I go on to the next study, any questions about this one around the opera company or around avoiding the ask overall? And this is when I do my bit of vamping and talk about how we would love to have you present a test from your organization or an organization that you serve on future Test of the Month gatherings. It's really great to be able to have those types of efforts that we can talk about nonprofit practitioners can talk to other practitioners, and we can be talking about the types of things that you want to be talking about. So hearing no questions, and I can always come back, so come back with any questions as you have them. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was another nudge with unintended consequences, that of the reminder email. We all know the email. It's sometimes a fake forward, and sometimes I wanted to make sure that you saw this, or our deadline is approaching type email. And sending that to an additional person has almost no cost, no marginal cost. You're paying for the electricity that fires a few electrons, and that's about it. But there are efforts that aren't easily quantified in money, and that's lower open rates, that's higher unsubscribe rates, that's the price of annoying donors potentially, and getting them not to give in the future. So a charity did an experiment where half of their donors got an extra email reminder and half did not. And not surprisingly, for those of you who have sent out reminder emails, it brought in more money, 2/3 more revenue to be precise. And that's usually about par for the course with a reminder email or a reminder mail piece. It's about as you take the original, you subtract off about 30%, and that's going to be the effectiveness of the follow-up, plus or minus. In this case, it was $2.18 additional revenue per person that they were sending the email to. So yay, reminder email wins, and you want to send 2 emails instead of 1. Except that this is about unintended consequences. So they did an experiment that would be great if we can all do as we're doing these types of cadence experiments. They looked at the long-term impact, and they found that people who donated had increased annoyance from the reminder. And so it shifted some people they found that future emails to that donor cohort who got the second email raised $1.95 less over the next year period. So the reminder email raised an additional $2.18, but it lowered donations among people who received it by $1.95 going on later in that year. So the net positive was only 23 cents per person. Well, that's not bad. You would still take 23 cents per person. So much of what we do as direct marketers you're clawing for that extra percentage point or that dollar in average gift. Big, little differences add up to make big differences. And I believe that and preach that. But this doesn't include unsubscribes. And so when you sum it all up, the researchers found that the increased volume of reminders led to a negative revenue in the long run, because you had people who were annoyed and didn't give later that year, and you had people who said enough. The increased number of unsubscribes that happened brought people out of the database, out of the potential donation sphere. And so the impact of a reminder email was net negative for the organization. That said, it may not be net negative for all organizations. This could have just been an organization that was chock-a-block with emails. That's a technical term for the number of emails that go out. So it means a lot. Or it could be an organization where one reminder email was a substantial departure for what they've done in the past. So this is something to look at as an organization. If you're doing reminder emails, you may want to test this, not looking just at the immediate revenue impacts, but at the long-term impacts, because so many of these nudges that we try to have, whether it's forced choices or reminder emails, can have negative externalities and unintended consequences. So that's what I have. There's a question that they send reminder emails on each subsequent email that year, thus doubling at least the number of total emails. No, this was one additional email. So a relatively small intervention with a relatively large outsized effect. That said, I believe it was as part of a year-end fundraising campaign. So it was probably a bit more hyped than the normal, but I'm not sure on that point. My apologies. Quick question about the reminder email. How much time passed between email 1 and 2, and was the reminder exactly the same? It has been a while since I looked at this study. I believe that it was a week that passed between emails 1 and 2. I think it was a 10-day out email and a 3-day out email. But I'm not sure on that. And the reminder email was not exactly the same in this case. It wasn't one of the fake forwards that are so popular. They did rewrite it a little bit to say, just wanted to remind you, and change the text a little bit at the top. I will say that we actually see this effect somewhat in mail as well. There was another study of a Dutch charity that found, actually a set of 5 Dutch charities, and they found that adding a mail piece to the mail stream increased their overall revenue, but that 63% of the revenue that was garnered by the new mail piece would have been received by the pieces around it. It just so happened that they had this new one in front of them. And so there's this effect of cannibalizing revenues from existing communications. And there's a potential annoyance factor there as well. So there's another place where testing reminder mail pieces or testing additional mail pieces, you want to look not just at, oh, this piece made money in terms of who responded to it, but how does having 14 mail pieces function versus 12 mail pieces or versus 16 mail pieces? I'm fully on the record as saying that fewer mail pieces isn't the answer. More mail pieces isn't the answer. The answer is usually more customized to each individual donor, how you want to talk to them. Any other questions? This is, I believe, oh, it's not being recorded. So I will get to do this seminar live again so that we can post it to YouTube, but it will be posted on YouTube. I believe this is the 2nd month in a row on this, so you would have think I learned by now, which is something I can say because we're not recording it. But there will be a YouTube version of this available at some point. Oh, someone is saying it does look like it's being recorded, so don't I look like a monkey's uncle? So this will be on YouTube by hook or by crook. And again, we would love to have your tests in this slot. The ones from the literature I love because there's a great amount of very rich data that can come from it, but there really is nothing better from hearing from a nonprofit who did the test, who can show examples, who can talk about the experience of it, and really have things that are applicable for this audience. And with that, I bid you adieu. Have good health and good testing, and please reach out to me, Nick Ellinger at moredmgroup.com, if you have a test that you'd like to share. Thank you very much and have a good day.